Well, I don't think we've done too many live recordings, live tapings of the Morning Pit. But here we are. This is a tape before a live studio audience. You guys are part of the Morning Pit today. Today, the Morning Pit is taking place live on a Monday night. I think Howard Stern used to do this. He would go out to like Vegas and tape shows live, but obviously he wasn't going to be doing it live at like 3 a.m., which would be what time he would need to be on for his regular radio show time at 6 a.m. on the East Coast. And so they tape it like in, whatever afternoon or evenings and then just play it back. And so that's what this is going to be. It's a live Panther-Lair show on Monday night. It's going to double as the Morning Pit for Tuesday. Unless something crazy happens after we get done with this live show, then we'll tape another one and we'll have another one going on. But some of those days where there's just too much that happens, too many big stories that are coming out, and if it had only been one story today, if there was only one thing that happened today, we could have just rolled it into a regular Morning Pit. We didn't need to do a live show. But there were two things that happened, and both of them were big enough that you couldn't just fit them both into one episode. We couldn't spend one episode of the Morning Pit talking about Dayon Hayes and Cam Corrin without, shorting both subjects considerably, because they're both big stories, one for Pitt football, one for Pitt basketball. A lot of implications on both ends. It means a lot one way or the other. Some good, some bad, certainly. And so we had to do a live show here tonight on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, you want to make sure that you don't miss any of your, you don't want to miss any of these live shows. So the best way to do it is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the place. You can, like this video, obviously, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you won't miss any, maybe you weren't on Twitter. Maybe you weren't on the message boards today at Panther-Lair.com, so you didn't see that we were going to do a special sort of emergency live episode. But you can make sure that you won't miss any of those if you subscribe at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. The button's right down there below. So do that and like the video as well if you can. We'll talk about Panther-Lair.com because, I've already shared a lot of thoughts on Dayon Hayes there. I'm definitely going to have a lot of thoughts on Cam Corrin. I was working on those when the Dayon Hayes stuff started coming out, and that kind of jumbled everything up. But I figured we could talk about it here tonight. We've already put some thoughts on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, but this is exactly the kind of thing that a live show is for, is when a lot of news breaks, you talk about it. And I kind of want to talk about the basketball side first, I'll be honest, but the football side is more recent. The football side is, it feels a little more pressing. It happened more recently. Is Dayon Hayes going into the transfer portal? I think it was reported by Tipton Edits, and Dayon confirmed it with the Rivals portal guys and all kinds of people. And it's just remarkable. I don't even know where you start. This is what I hate when people say, like, well, this is everything that's bad with college football. But, like, here we are again in another situation where you're just sitting back saying, this is unbelievable. Like, really? This is happening? This guy is going into the transfer portal? And, to some extent, Jordan Addison was that first one that was really eye-opening, certainly for people around Pitt. You know what I mean? Pitt fans, Pitt media, people around Pittsburgh. I think it was one of the first that was really eye-opening. I think nationally it was one of the first. He wasn't the first big-name guy to go into the portal, but it was one of the first ones where you said, wow, wait, what? This guy, who's got a locked-in role as the number one player at his position on a team that's going to feature his position. And we can get into a debate about what Frank Cignetti's offense would have been with Jordan Addison in 2022, but certainly we would say about Dayon Hayes in 2024 that he was locked into a feature role on a team that was going to feature his position. He wasn't going to be a backup for sure. He wasn't going to be a reserve for sure. And he wasn't going to play a position that was going to be minimized or de-emphasized. This is one of the most aggressive attacking defensive line systems in the country. It's all predicated on the defensive ends getting into the backfield and making plays. Nate Matlack came here for that very reason. And while Charlie Partridge is gone, Tim Doust is here, and he's talking it up even more. They want to attack even more. So it's not like Dayon Hayes was going to find a better fit. And I don't really think it's about Dayon Hayes not meshing with Tim Doust, because the reality is Dayon Hayes was flirting with the transfer portal in December when Charlie Partridge was still the coach here. And so it's not even about that. It's not even about losing his position coach. It's not about finding a better fit. It's about one thing. It's the same thing that drew DeAndre Jules away. And it's the same thing that drew Sam Okunlola away. And that's what it is right now. That's where we are right now. The guys can walk away from the program they've played for the past 4 years, in a situation, in a role where they are going to be the number one guy. Because Pitt will have other transfers this spring. There'll be other guys who leave the team. Wouldn't be surprised if it happens while we're talking right now. Not because I have any kind of inside info or insight or something like that, just because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. I mean, to some extent, it has to happen. They need to get under the scholarship limit, but it's just going to happen. That there are guys who are down the depth chart, second team, third team, fourth team, beyond, who are going to say, I can get a better opportunity elsewhere. That's going to happen. We could probably make some educated guesses on who those guys are going to be, or at least who some of them will be. But Dayon Hayes isn't going to get a better opportunity elsewhere. Sam Okunlola wasn't going to get a better opportunity elsewhere. He was going to be a starting defensive end here. DeAndre Jules wasn't going to get a better opportunity elsewhere. If we're talking about, style of defense, role on the defense, and for those guys, Jules and Okunlola, they left when Charlie Partridge was here, so it's not even about coaching on the defensive line. Starting jobs, Jules, Okunlola, Hayes were all going to be starters. It's not about any of that. We talk a lot about Christian Bayer, right? And Christian Bayer has come up a lot as a potential transfer candidate. And if that comes to pass, if that happens, I don't know if it will or not, but if it does, I feel like I have to look every time I get a notification on my phone, because who knows who's going to be going into the transfer portal next. But if Christian Bayer goes, it's understandable. He got passed up. He was the starter for 5 games last year, and now he ends spring camp as seemingly the number 3 quarterback. So, okay, you get it. You understand why maybe he's going to move on. But that's not Dayon Hayes. Dayon Hayes wasn't going to be number 3. Dayon Hayes wasn't going to be a backup. Dayon Hayes wasn't going to have his role de-emphasized or his reps cut or his snaps cut. He was the best defensive end on this team. Maybe not the most consistent, maybe not the most mature, but probably the best overall defensive end on this team. And now, poof, gone. Heading for the transfer portal. When I think it officially opens tomorrow. I think it opens on the 16th. So he'll go in then. Presumably. Who knows? Because you know what? And this is just as indicative of the problems as anything. Dayon Hayes could wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what? That offer from Alliance 412, that NIL money, that was actually good enough. I got a truck or whatever. I got a this. I got that. I think I'll stay. And he could very well do that. And, they'll take him back. Right? I mean, they'll take him back because, of course they will. And that's part of it too. I mean, the players can just come and go and say they're coming and going, and just make those decisions and base it on how they feel about the NIL money. And to some extent, the players should get what they're owed. They should get what they deserve. They should get, a portion of the revenue that they generate for the schools, because the schools make oodles of money, piles of cash, and it's built by the players. I mean, the players are the ones who are putting in the work and ultimately generating that revenue. And so they should get a cut, and they should have been getting a cut for a very long time. But we've gone so far in the opposite direction. And I'm all for empowering the players, but we've gone so far to where it's, I don't want to say an imbalance of power, because the coaches have a ridiculous amount of power as well, and that's somewhat imbalanced also in the way they can move and what they can do. And maybe we need a little bit of a structure there as well, maybe a system for coaches But this bouncing in and out, and I'm going to transfer, so I better get some more money. Oh, okay, I got some more money. Okay, I'm not going to transfer. Oh, I decided I think I'm going to do it again. Oh, you're not going to pay me this time. Okay, well, I'll go and I'll find somebody who will. And maybe that's, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's a fine way to operate. Maybe that's a fine way to have the system set up. It's just all over the place. You never know who's going to be there. You never know who's going to be on the team. And you never know who's going to stick around. And I shouldn't even say who's going to be on the team, because the concept of team starts taking a hit when you're willing to move like this. You wonder what the commitment was previously. And that's not just about Dayon Hayes. It's about anybody who makes moves sort of in that fashion that you start to wonder, like, what was the commitment level to begin with? But I mean, there has to be some sort of structure. There has to be some sort of system in place that's organized in some way. And that's probably, I think coaches would tell you that's their biggest complaint. I think that I would say that's my biggest complaint. I think probably some players who have a level head about it would say that that's their biggest complaint, that the complete lack of structure, the complete lack of accountability and transparency, there's no system. There's that great quote in Apocalypse Now, and he says, Colonel Kurtz says, do you believe my methods are unsound? And he says, I don't see any method at all. It's not that the system is screwed up. It's that there's no system at all. There's no structure to it. There's no organization to it. And that doesn't necessarily mean we need to limit player movement, but we do need a little bit of structure if you're going to have a system like this. If you're going to have the transfer portal and NIL working in conjunction, which they are, you need some sort of structure to it. And ultimately, whatever they come up with now is just a bridge to get to the point where you're paying the players a salary. And then they can deal with taxes, and they can deal with contracts, and they can deal with getting cut, and they can deal with the harsh realities of the business side of the sport, which up to this point they have been largely immune from. But they can have that, and they can get the salaries, and they can find out a little bit more about how, if you want to move into the real world sooner, well, here's the opportunity to do so. And again, I don't begrudge the players anything that they've earned, because they have earned this. All of the crazy money that college sports makes is made on the backs of these young men. But you need a structure of some kind. And there is none right now. There is none. Obviously, a lot of comments and questions. A lot of people have things to say about this situation. Dayon Hayes leaving Pitt for the transfer portal. Mark Shilaju says, very confusing messages about Dayon Hayes on Twitter. Several saying he is leaving, but then Alliance 412 saying he's back now. What is really happening with him? I don't see anything from Alliance 412 about this. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I see, Dayon Hayes retweeting the tweet about him going into the transfer portal. Dayon Hayes telling the Rivals transfer portal that he's going into the transfer portal. I don't see anything really from Alliance 412 indicating that he's not. Let me look again at their pitch. So I'm not really sure what you're referring to there, Mark. So I apologize. I apologize about that. But if you see something else, let me know for sure. We got a lot of comments. You guys have a lot to say. If you want to make sure we read your comment or answer your question, you be a super chatter. As always, click that little $sign down at the bottom. You see it at the bottom of the chat. Which way is that pointing for you guys? Down there. Yeah, down there. There's that little $sign. You click that. You can kick a couple bucks to the podcast. Show a little appreciation. We appreciate you for sure. And, we'll be sure to read your comment or your question. I can't guarantee we'll get to all of these, but we'll get to as many as we can. We'll definitely get to the super chatters. John Christofich says, NIL and the transfer portal have destroyed college sports. I think I still think it's overdoing it. Left unchecked, left unstructured, left unfettered for the next 20 years. Yeah. I think college sports is in the midst of and will continue to be in a period of significant transition where some of the very foundations of the sport have been unmoored, and I think when you're in the middle of a transition like that, it can feel like the thing you've known is getting destroyed or has been destroyed. And understandably so, because the thing you've known is not going to be what that thing is anymore. Regional rivalries and conference traditions and, unpaid labor, indentured servitude, all those things, that's not going to be what college sports is anymore. It's much closer to a pro sports model than it was 25 years ago. And that can feel like the sport is being destroyed. Maybe just the old model, the old concept of college football has been destroyed. Yeah, I would probably agree about that. But I don't know that the sport itself is completely dead. I also don't know exactly where it goes from here. I don't know what it looks like on the other side. I don't know what college football is going to be, certainly in 10 years, maybe even in 5 years. I don't know where Pitt is going to be in 5 years. I don't know what the ACC is going to look like in 2029. As we're sitting here getting ready for the 2029 season, I don't know what any of this is going to be. It's too much a period of transition right now, and there are too many variables. There are too many things that are up in the air, and there are too many things. There's too much uncertainty. I don't know what it's going to be. And that applies on a lot of levels. I mean, pretty much every element you talk about of Pitt athletics, I don't know what that's going to look like. And then you just build out from there. From the hyper-specific and hyper-local of Pitt athletics all the way out through the conferences to the sport itself. I don't know. I don't think it's destroyed. I think there's still a lot of passion that people feel. I think people will continue to feel a lot of passion because I've always said, the reason there's so much passion about college sports is because people went to the school. They have that direct connection to the school. We always make fun of fans who say we when they talk about the Pirates or the Steelers. Oh, we drafted Limas Swede. Well, you drafted Limas Swede? What are you talking about? We? What's this first person? But of any sports league or organization, college sports is the one where maybe a first person pronoun applies the most or most closely applies. Because you actually went to the school. You paid to go to the school. You were a student there just like these players are. And so you feel a closer affinity and a closer connection to the sports teams because you are a part of the school and the school's a part of you. And that's not going to change. What might change is some of the interest level in the sports. If some sports or some teams or some schools get relegated to a situation where it's not just that they can't conceptually win, but they just literally cannot win. They are separated by some sort of barrier from whatever championship exists in the sport. Then you might start running into issues of interest and disinterest. But I think as long as people are going to these schools and these schools have sports teams, there'll be that connection and there'll be that fandom, and that'll keep the thing afloat. But I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years. I really don't, because there's so much up in the air and there's so many variables and so much uncertainty. And again, it goes from the hyper-local level all the way up to the national level and beyond. And so I don't think it's necessarily destroyed college sports, but it's definitely changed it. It's definitely a lot of upheaval. TRR says the defensive end rotation now, in your opinion, can the Clemson kid be counted on? Yeah, the Clemson kid, David Ojebwe, didn't exactly get a resounding endorsement from his teammates when he was drafted after. I think he was drafted after a walk-on or drafted kind of low among the defensive ends in the draft for the Blue Gold game last week. I mean, you take Dayon Hayes out of it. It's funny. I'm looking at the scholarship board right now, the one that we published on March 3rd. And it listed projected for this season 12 scholarship defensive ends. Okay? Now, of those 12 scholarship defensive ends, Nikai Johnson has fully moved to defensive tackle. Bam Brima seems to have moved to defensive tackle as well, although maybe he can move back in light of some of this stuff. Nate Temple is out due to injury. And then Ty Uhas is, as a true freshman, maybe 50-50 on playing end or tackle. So you're down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those guys, leaving you with 7 scholarship defensive ends. Nate Matlack, the transfer from Kansas State, Jimmy Scott, the redshirt sophomore, Antonio Kamen, Maverick Grazio, and David Ojebwe are redshirt freshmen, and then Zach Crothers and Sincere Edwards are true freshmen. If I was going to put a starting lineup on the field tomorrow, like my guess, not necessarily my opinion, my guess is it would be Nate Matlack and Jimmy Scott starting with Sincere Edwards and somebody else behind them. I don't know who the 4th guy is. Maybe Bam Brima moves back to defensive end. I don't think Nikai Johnson's moving back, but Bam Brima, I guess, could move back. I don't really know about David Ojebwe. I don't think he had a great spring. It's just, an already thin position. An already thin position just keeps getting thinner. When you're talking about maybe 7 scholarship guys. And if you go into a season with 7 scholarship defensive ends, you are running a very serious risk of one injury putting you in a bad spot. But some would say they're already in a bad spot. Let's see. Josh Newark says, Peak comparing himself to Howard Stern is proof that NIL has ruined college athletics. I opened the show just because it reminded me of when, Howard Stern would record a live show in like Las Vegas, and then they would broadcast it the next morning on the East Coast, even though it wasn't live. And that's what's going to be happening, because I'm not going to finish this hour long. I think we're going to go an hour because we haven't even started talking about basketball yet. Although maybe I should. Maybe we should just complain about Dayon Hayes and the football side of things for this hour, and then I'll record a morning pit talking up Cam Corrin to get your day started with happier news, because I think that is good news for Pitt basketball to get Corrin. But no, I'm not comparing myself to Howard Stern. It was just it reminded me of that situation. Eric Bruno says, I don't know what's worse, Dayon Hayes leaving or people that refuse to donate to NIL. It is funny that some of the response that I saw was like, Dayon Hayes is leaving? I can't believe this. I'm never donating to NIL. I'm never donating. This is I think I saw somebody say something like this, like, this is why I don't donate to Alliance 412. So Alliance 412 wants you to donate to help in the efforts to retain players, but you don't donate because players don't get retained. That seems backwards. Is that backwards? Is that like nose and face spiting and all that stuff? Or is that like, am I missing the point here? Are you missing the point here? John Kristovich says it's not the responsibility of the fans to pay college players. And you're right, or it's not, or at least it shouldn't be. But right now it is. And so you can like get on your moral high ground about it and say like, no, fans should not have to pay the players. And you'd be right about that. But what is that getting you? I said this a few weeks ago when we talked about NIL and stuff like that like you just, like right now, the best thing fans can do is just hold their nose and write the check. And it stinks. That's what it's come to. It stinks that these conferences and these schools have put off compensating these players for so long that it's now fallen to the fans that they're setting up a booth outside the stadium at Acrisure Stadium for the spring game so you can meet Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett and hopefully donate to Alliance 412, that they're trying to get major donors who should be, donating to the school to help with facilities or scholarships or whatever. They're trying to get those donors to donate that money to pay the players so that next year they can have a 2 deep on the defensive line. But if the schools don't want to do it, who should? Who will? The fans have to step up, because the fans just want wins. The fans don't actually reap anything financially out of the wins. Here's the part that this is the part that's the real kicking where. The fans don't, what the fans get out of wins? They enjoy it. It's fun. they don't get anything financially. I mean, you know, if you bet on games or something like that, but like they pay for the tickets, they pay for all the concessions and the seat licenses and the donations and all those other things you have to do when you go to the game. They're donating to NIL all just because they want to go watch their favorite team win games. And it's up to them to pay the money to get the players to win the games. You know who actually makes money off of that deal? You know who actually gets something out of that? It's not even the players. It's the school. The schools get all that money, the conferences, the TV networks, and they don't have to pay the players. What a setup. Hey, you go pay these guys over here so they can do stuff that makes me money. What the hell is that? What in what world does that make sense? And so no, the fans don't. The fans should not have that responsibility. But they do because the people with the money and the people with the power just keep pushing it off. And finally, the players found a way around all of the rigors of amateurism and the regulations and all of those things. They found a way to get themselves something extra. And the schools are still refusing to find a way to be involved in providing that money. They want you to pay the players. And so you may hate it, but you still want to see your team win. You may be like, I don't want to make money for Pitt or the ACC or the SEC or any of these schools or any of these conferences or any of these TV networks who caused all of this from the very beginning. You may be like, I don't want to make money for them. I don't want to do things that cause those guys to do better, but I want my team to win. And so you have to pay for it. What a system. It's not a system. It's not. I keep saying a system or a structure. It's not a system. It's just completely haphazard. Homer Simpson says NIL took away the fan caring about the player. They come and go. It's all about money. If they don't win at this point, it's just a bad investment. Harsh but true. Yeah. I mean, like that. There's some real truth to that. Like you're not wrong. You know, it's becoming less and less of interest in the individual players, getting to know the individual players, and following guys as they grow and develop. It's becoming more and more of a commodity. And there was always some element of that to begin with, but it's becoming more and more of a commodity. Homer Simpson says, let's just hope the new basketball transfers a good investment and wish the football player good luck. Yeah. See, I wonder if we should transition over to talking to basketball. There's a lot of comments here about Dayon Hayes, and let's run through comments and get through what you guys are saying here, and we'll see where we're at. I'll just read a bunch of these and respond from time to time. Hustle Westbrook says, dude wanted the bag just like the rest of them. Next man up. Yep, that's what it's going to come down to. Eric Bruno says, you mean athletes are not allowed to be paid, but the NCAA can be $1 billion per year industry off those same athletes? That scholarship money is like losing $5 out of the pocket. He's in a back and forth with John Kristovich about this. I'll let you guys settle that one out. Adam Vinchik says, will they go get a defensive end in the portal now? I mean, if they can find one. I mean, I think that's the goal. I think they would like to get another defensive end. I think they wanted to get another defensive lineman in the winter, but you can only get what is out there. And there will be players out there, but will they find the kind of player they need? Now, if they feel good about Nate Matlack and Jimmy Scott, I think Sincere Edwards is going to be really good. Maybe you thrust him into action a little bit sooner than you would like. But, there's a couple guys in there. So maybe you don't need to go out and get that big-time number one defensive end, that guy to actually replace Dayon Hayes. Maybe you just go find somebody who can fill out your rotation. But who knows? Maybe a guy in the portal is thinking I'm better than that anyway, even if they're not. Maybe they have that kind of opinion of themselves. Homer Simpson says, talking about better opportunity, I'm hoping that Christian Veer leaves and opens up a scholarship for another quarterback. Transfer wasn't impressive in the spring game. Open up another scholarship for another quarterback transfer. Wasn't impressed in the spring game with the current quarterbacks. I don't think they'll try to get another transfer quarterback. It looks like they're trying to recruit 2 high school guys in the 2025 recruiting class. And so, I think they'll probably, if they lose a quarterback to the transfer portal from the current roster, I don't think they're going to go try and get a transfer to replace him. I think it's going to be Nate Yarnell, number 1, Eli Holstein, number 2, and Ty Diefenbach, number 3, if Christian Veer does leave for the transfer portal. And I think they'll be okay. I thought Yarnell was fine. I thought he did a perfectly good job in the Blue Gold game. I thought he did a perfectly good job last year. And I think Eli Holstein will be okay too. He missed throws, but those guys had some big drops as well. So I don't, I think it'll be okay. I think they'll be fine with that. I think there are other things. I think this scheme has to work. This system has to work. I think they have to keep the offensive line healthy. I think the wide receivers need to, if they can't make plays, if they're not going to be like big time deep threats and that kind of thing, they can still run the routes well, get open, and make catches when the ball gets to them. I know Pat Narduzzi talked up Kenny Johnson. I think he's got a pretty high ceiling, a lot of potential, but we'll see. We'll see what happens when they're running the full offense and kind of what it looks like with those guys out there. But I think the quarterbacks are okay. I don't know that they necessarily need to go get another transfer, and I don't think they really will go get another transfer. Some super chatters. You guys jumped in at the end. Eric Bruno says, is a super chatter. He says, your NIL donation speech was spot on. If you don't donate, you can't complain. That's the landscape of college athletics. It's the only way right now. Yeah, unfortunately, that's what it is right now. Bill Florian says, I think we do see a change soon as we see this happening with other schools. Also, Penn State just lost its best wide receiver, happening everywhere. I saw they lost the receiver, but I didn't see who it was. Oh yeah, Keandre Lambert-Smith. That's right. Yeah, so that is a pretty big blow. And again, it's not just Pitt. You're right, Bill. It's kind of happening all over the country, but it still stings when it happens here, right? All right, let's get back into these comments and questions. Josh Newark says, does Alliance 412 add more money to the pot to buy him back? So, talking about Dayon Hayes here. Like I said earlier, I don't think you can really... You can't count anything out. You can't eliminate any possibility. You can't eliminate the possibility that Dayon Hayes wakes up tomorrow and says, you know what? Actually, I'm good. I want to stay here. And he's back. You know what I mean? You can't eliminate the possibility that Alliance 412 wakes up tomorrow and says, you know what? Actually, we'll pony up again. We'll come up with more money. You can't rule any of those things out. My thought on how we got to this point right here at 8:30 on Monday night is that Dayon Hayes went looking for more after already getting more twice in December. And a decision was made of there's only so far you can push this. There's only so far you can go with this. At some point, there has to be a ceiling where you can't let just one player keep taking up a significant chunk of the budget. You can't. There's a lot of work that has to get done. There's a lot of work that has to get done on the basketball side. There's a lot of work that will have to get done on the football side. You can't just let one guy take up that much. You can't. You have to make decisions. You have to make business decisions, smart decisions along the way in order to keep the whole operation afloat. And I think with Dayon Hayes, where, I think there were negotiations after the season. They got it done. There were renegotiations after that. They got it done. And now here we are after spring, maybe looking at renegotiations again. And saying, you know what, we just gotta hold off here. You have to draw a line in the sand at some point. That's what I mean about structure, a system. You need something makes it a little bit organized, a little orderly. Hustle Westbrook says players should be paid off performance that was already completed. I mean, to some extent, that's sort of what you're looking to do when it comes to retaining players. I mean, you figure if there's two angles of NIL. You kind of look at it like, there's acquisition of bringing in transfers and bringing in guys to the program, and then there's retention of holding on to the guys that are in your program. You keep them around, and that's what the retention side is. And I think that's been, for schools like Pitt and probably most schools around the country, that's been the primary emphasis, is you keep guys. You're still going out and trying to add transfers, and Pitt certainly did that. But I think the main emphasis has been retention. So they held on to Gavin Bartholomew and Kenny Johnson and Rodney Hammond and Branson Taylor and Ryan Baer and Solomon DeShields and all these guys. And at one point we would have said Dayon Hayes. They held on to these guys through the retention efforts, which is kind of what you're talking about, kind of money paid for performance already achieved. But there is some of it that goes into transfer portal acquisition and high school as well. Homer Simpson says college football players should only be paid off of jersey sales in the NCAA game. Yeah, I don't think that's I think there's probably a little bit more they could get than that. Josh Newark says, I'd love to see these contracts. The Alliance paid Dayon Hayes in December. Does Alliance 412 sue him to get that money back? The legal aspect of this is fascinating. Well, I think with the NIL money, it's not a lump sum. I don't think you agree to whatever $200,000 or something like that, and you get a check for $200,000. I think it goes monthly. I think a lot of times there is language worked into these deals that sort of protect against a guy leaving. That eventually, or essentially like nullify the deal if you like leave the area or something like that. They can't make it like you have to stay at Ohio State. But it's like, you don't get this money if you are no longer, if you play football outside of Columbus, or you're no longer, you know what I mean? Like if you don't live in Columbus, it's something like that. They have some kind of language that ties it geographically that makes it so you basically don't get any more of the money if you leave. And they pay it monthly, so it's not like there's a lot of now I think it is sort of settled in to the standard is paying monthly, so you don't run into that issue of, trying to get money back. Royce Beacom says the issue is, why is Pitt coming up consistently short, and it appears to be on the NIL side. Two things in there, Royce. Is Pitt coming up consistently short because they were able to hang on to, Bartholomew, Johnson, Hammond, DeShields, Baer, Taylor, Hayes, they were able to come up plenty long enough back in December on that one. And then if your question is like, why are they coming up short in the NIL side? It's because NIL donations aren't what they need to be. It's not a difficult question to answer. Why doesn't Pitt have more NIL money? Because people aren't donating enough NIL money. And the reality is, like, I don't know, we might have billionaires watching this, but the people who are really going to make things happen, the big funding push, is from the, in fundraising terms, the whale, right? I mean, the big money guys. That's where you come up with that kind of cash to keep the big time players and go get big time players. You need everybody who's donating at the 1976 level or whatever it is. You need everybody who's donating $50 a month. That's huge. That's $600 a year. But you need a lot of those people. You need 100 of those people or 1,000 of those people to get a real impact amount. And so why is Pitt lagging on the NIL side? They're not getting the NIL donations. OOF McGee says this is Narduzzi's fault. No one wants to play for him. Same pay, more money, and anyone would want to leave, and I don't blame them. No one wants to play for them. Play for him, huh? Oh, and he keeps going, OOF McGee. No one wants to join Alliance 412 because Narduzzi is a terrible human. Panther-Lair is bigger than Alliance 412. And here, you know what? We'll nightcap you on this one, OOF McGee. I'm not going to give you any more space here, but we'll leave you with this one. I don't want coaches who are afraid to adapt to modern day college football. Well, I'm pretty sure the entire overhaul of the coaching staff points in the other direction. So we'll move on. Justin Bozeman says nobody wants to coach in college now either. All those guys want to be in the NFL now. I mean, all right, let's say you are Charlie Partridge. Okay, let's use him as an example. Okay, and coming through the season, DeAndre Jules has a breakout year. Sam Okunlola finishes really strong. You get to the end of the season and you hear that Jules is looking to transfer because he's going to get paid. And you hear that Okunlola is good, and then he comes back looking for more. And you're like, Jules, man, I coached and developed this guy for like 5 years. And it took 5 years to get him to this point, but we finally got him to the place where he can play in this defense, and he understands this defense, and he knows how to work this defense, and he, you know, he's a good player in this defense. And now he's just leaving for like a little more money? And then Okunlola, I mean, yeah, you're a really talented guy, but like we're just getting started here, man. And we've got a defense that can really attack and really use. And oh, good, you're coming back. Oh, wait, no, you're going again. What's going on, man? And then Dayon, you're like, Dayon, man, we've been tight for a long time. And you're going? Or you're thinking about the portal? Okay, good, we got that settled. Good, I'm glad you're all set. I can't wait to work for you. Oh, wait, you're going again? You're what? And this is in December. Okay, good. We got this settled again. Okay, and so you're Charlie Partridge, and that's just what you went through in December, right? Dealing with that. Oh, and then you also had to deal with like Francis Brew, and you know he was the main recruiter for Jeremiah Marcelin, and so there were a number of those things that you kind of had to deal with as well on the recruiting side. And let's say you're Charlie Partridge and you dealt with all of that in December and you decided not to take the Colts job and you stay with Pitt in January and February and you go through all of spring camp and you're coaching these guys up and you see little flashes every now and then that Dayon is making strides or he's making progress. He's getting better. He's getting more consistent. This might finally be the year. Maybe he's going to turn it around. And now he's gone again. And you say, what am I doing here? Why am I investing the time and the effort and the emotion into trying to get these guys to grow and become better players and become better on the field and more effective on the field? Why am I putting anything into this? It's just a job. I have to look at this just as a job. And you start taking some of the emotion out of it and some of the heart out of it because it's just a job. And if I want to coach pros, I've got opportunities to go coach pros. So you do. I mean, and I don't think you can blame anybody for doing it. Like, why would you want to go through that? You know, I mean, how many situations did I just list that directly impact the job that Charlie Partridge would have had to do this season? 6 things that he had to deal with there of guys coming and or going. You don't know which way it's going to go. And now, like as evidenced by this news today, it could swing back again. You just never know. It's complete uncertainty. Who would want to rely on that? Who would want to go through that? I could see why guys like Partridge left. Job Poetics says, NIL aside, I'd argue that big conference realignment has destroyed college sports. Players should be compensated. They take risks like anyone else. I have a problem with entitlement on all fronts. Yeah, I agree. And conference realignment, I think definitely it put the money first. Right. And so it created an environment where, well, I mean, it didn't create the environment. The environment of trying to get the most money possible has always existed. It just, slowly but surely, they got to a point where they realized, you know how we could really get the most money possible? Well, Nebraska, you come up here, and A&M, you go over there, and Texas and Oklahoma, you come over here. That's the way. That's how we'll get the most money possible. And I think the conference realignment wasn't the moment when everyone committed to getting the most money possible, but it was a product of it, and it sort of solidified, it codified the drive of profit above all else, of anything approaching the idea of like sentiment or tradition or anything like that out the window. Like, it's secondary. It doesn't matter. Answer to any question of should you do this or should you do that is which one makes more money. And once you start down that path where every decision is made that way, it's self-perpetuating. Like, you can't turn around from that. You can't start making decisions that aren't made solely for the profit. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just, you're not going to 2 years from now make a decision where you say, you know what, we could get less, this will get us less money, but it's the better decision for the sport. That's never going to happen, because now there is one way that everything is judged all the time, and it's, how does it make more money? Does it make more money? How much money can it make, and how can we get it to make more? And conference realignment is certainly a part of that. No question. Let's see. H2P STRU says, Chris, what does paying players get me? It's nothing. I don't have the money to donate enough where it matters. Just hold my nose and cut the check. Hardest of all, powered passes. I get you. I know what you're saying. And I agree. And it's like, the sell from Alliance 412 is, if you want your teams to succeed, you gotta write the check, so that we can use the money to get the players and keep the players. And so, like, your donation to Alliance 412, what does it get you? It potentially gives you a chance to win more games. Now, I understand, like I said, I don't think we have billionaires on this podcast, watching this podcast. I think we, for the most part, we're pretty, all average Joes, where $20 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month is decent chunk, but we're probably not going to go too far over that, if we're talking about what income bracket most of us are in, right? And so to some extent, yeah, I mean, it's a push for, Alliance 412 is making a push for, and needs to make a push for, the people who make the most, who have the most to give, because that's going to make the most impact. But the system, and again, I use that term loosely, is set up to put the impetus on the fans, unfortunately. Brock Owen says the reality is Pitt football is screwed if they can't hold on to a hometown guy who was pro Pitt since the moment he arrived. Sad. I mean, that's part of it, but that's kind of, actually, you know what, Brock? That ties into what I was just saying. What makes the most money? Being a hometown guy or going somewhere else? This is the bottom line. It truly is the bottom line. Just start reading through these. H2P STRU says if Pitt wants to make a big difference in the NIL space, they need big spenders, not the game of convincing 10,000 people to donate $100. You're right. Josh Newark says, wow, Chris Carter just reported Dayon Hayes is leaving because, quote, we can't win right now. I didn't see that. I didn't. I'll look it up. I'm guessing Chris reached out to Dayon, Ooh, a PG exclusive. I don't believe we can win right now. He tells the Post-Gazette, it's just that I don't believe we can win right now. I believe we're going to win games, but I believe we are in a developmental stage, and I just can't do that right now. So I guess that's the entirety of the quote. It's just that I don't believe we can win right now. I believe we're going to win games, but I believe we are in a developmental stage, and I just can't do that right now. I feel like that would mean a little bit more coming from a guy like if Jordan Addison said that after he won the Biletnikoff Award, I'd get it. Dayon Hayes had like 4 sacks last year, right? Right? So he doesn't want to be in a developmental phase because he doesn't believe the team can win. But I imagine the team's chances of winning would have been greater last year if he had more than 4 sacks. Don't think you necessarily need to throw shade at the program, or at the team. That's just me. There's a super chat from Josh Newark says, check out Chris Carter's tweet headline. I see it. It was one quote, probably, I would guess, came in a direct message. Usually if it would be on the phone, you would have more conversation than that. It's one quote. Yeah, he had 4 sacks this past season. I think 7.5 in his career or something like that. So, Dayon doesn't, I don't know, So this is what Dayon Hayes is saying right now, is that he doesn't believe they can win right now. Well, like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, he was talking about how good they're going to be. So we take one to be sincere over the other. Maybe both, maybe neither. Let's scroll down. Yeah, I see the quotes. You guys are all putting them in here. I missed them when they came out because I was just talking here. Homer Simpson says, one positive, I was impressed with how fast the quarterbacks got the ball out or decided to run the new offense. Chris says Pitt needs to be ready for the possibility of the ACC folding. If Florida State and Clemson leave the ACC, then Pitt needs to get into the Big 12 or Big 10 or be stuck in an uncertain situation. Grant Sakuda says Dayon Hayes needs a longer developmental stage based on his lack of production. Will Z says he's unfortunately accurate. I'd be shocked if this team wins more than 4, to be honest. Maybe he sees just how bad this offense is and wants to play for a winning team. I mean, like that's fine, Will. You might be right, but I can't imagine what he's seen in spring camp this year is worse than what he saw in spring camp or training camp last year, right? Will Z also says Jordan Addison saw the same thing in Slovis. Obviously, the boatload of money Addison got helps too, but a decent part of the recruiting pitch was, well, your offense is going to be terrible. Yeah, possibly, but I'm not really sure that that sale. I don't know if that sales pitch was all that effective. I think there was a lot that went into Jordan Addison's decision. I mean, I'm starting to go down that road again, but I what do you sell Dayon Hayes on? Hey, dude, listen. That team won 3 games last year. I mean, you had more sacks than they had wins. I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of good that comes from Dayon Hayes talking about the team not playing well or not winning when he himself didn't have a great season last year, by his own admission. I don't really think there's a lot of good that comes out of that. Chris says NIL has started a bad trend. Players are opting out of bowl games or jumping from program to the highest bidder. Pitt needs to get serious about football or consider dropping the sport. Homer Simpson said, well, they're not going to drop the sport. Homer Simpson says, I knew NIL was going to slowly kill Pitt. We just don't have a big fan base. People barely show up to the games. Well, what you need, Homer, and to the rest of you guys talking about Pitt and NIL, I mean, you need just enough to survive until there's an actual system and a structure in place. You know what I mean? Until you have an actual system, you have to survive until then. Scrolling through, it's a lot of the same guys talking over and over and over again. Chris says Pitt needs to be ready to join the Big 12 if the ACC folds. If Pitt doesn't get a Big 12 invite, then we'll be in the same boat as Washington State and Oregon State. Look, I mean, I agree with you about that. I like, if the ACC is going to fold, Pitt needs to be ready to go to the Big 12. You know what I mean? They need to have all their ducks in a row to send their prettiest pictures to the Big 12 and say, hey, don't you want us to join your conference? I mean, they need to be ready to do that. There's no question about it. I absolutely agree with you on that. I don't know if they're preparing for that. They should be, and hopefully they are, because it seems inevitable that at some point the ACC is going to dissolve, and they need to be ready to act. Like, as soon as they catch wind of the ACC dissolving, they need to be ready to act, and that means preparing for that time right now. But I'm also, like, I mean, you're right. Like, everything you're saying there is accurate, and Pitt needs to be prepared for that eventuality. But at the same time, it just feels a little. I just want to talk about Dayon Hayes right now. And Cam Corrin, holy cow, we're an hour in. I didn't even get a chance to talk about the basketball thing. Looks like there will be a morning Pitt tomorrow. After all, I don't know if we need to spend another half hour here talking about that. Maybe I will separate it. Oh, Sam's Wood says talk about basketball. You're right. I never got a chance to do that. Now I feel like I should separate it. Because people who just want to hear about basketball and think about basketball, I don't know if they want to wait, through an hour of Dayon Hayes talk and bemoaning the state of Pitt football and the future of the ACC just to hear me say that I think Cam Corrin's going to be the starting center for Pitt next season and how that affects Guillermo Diaz-Graham and so on and so forth. So maybe we'll have to do a morning Pitt anyway. But let's see if there's any comments to wrap up on here on the football side. Let's see. TRR says, would Elliot Donald play defensive end? Perhaps. You mentioned that he lined up there Saturday in this morning's morning Pitt. No, I don't see him moving outside to defensive end. They just were doing some weird things with alignment. I mean, they had defensive ends lining up inside, defensive tackles lining up outside. I just didn't see him. I don't see that happening. You know what I mean? I think if anybody's going to move to defensive end, I think it would be like Bam Brima moving back outside. I really don't think they want to move Nakai Johnson. I think Nakai Johnson could be a starting defensive tackle after moving inside. So I don't see them moving him back out. Bam Brima would probably be the one guy that could move. I don't think there's any really, like, even linebackers. The way they've recruited outside linebackers, it's not like they have a big linebacker who can move to defensive end and be sort of an undersized DN. They've recruited mostly like safeties and then bulk them up to play like linebacker. I mean, Solomon DeShields was a defensive back and a wide receiver in high school. Rasheem Biles was a safety. Kyle Lewis and Jordan Bass and not Braylon Lovelace. He played linebacker just because he was at Leechburg and they needed, they needed their best player in the middle of the field as often as possible. But all those other guys were safeties, and they're sort of built that way, and that's how they played. So I don't see them moving anybody really. I don't think there are any options to move to defensive end. I think if you're going to add to that group and bulk the numbers up, you're either going to slide Bam Brima back outside or you're going to go find a transfer. And I'm not sure what they'll find there unless they just sort of lower it and look for a reserve of some sorts, and like somebody who's willing to come in and be a backup behind Nate Matlack and excuse me. Nate Matlack and who else was it doesn't even matter. I mean, all those guys we named, all those guys we talked all spring about how they weren't very deep at defensive end. Now here they are, even more shallow. Will Z says, Chris, this is a long shot, but what are the chances Alliance 412 paid him already? Because if they did, a lot of donors, including myself, are going to be furious. I can't speak to the details of every one of these like NIL contracts, but as far as I understand, like, these guys don't get a lump sum. Like, the standard operating procedure now is they don't get a lump sum. They get like a monthly sum. So, whatever Dayon Hayes was going to get for the year, let's say it was $350,000 or something like that. He didn't get a check for $350,000. You know what I mean? It's prorated over, months and paid monthly and all of that. And so I think if you then break the contract one way or the other, you don't get the rest of those months. So did he get something? Probably. Did he get it all? No, would be my guess. And I mean, that's just based on my sort of peripheral knowledge of how the whole thing has mostly worked with these guys over the last year, maybe 2 years. All right, we'll leave it on this. Chris says, Chris Peak, I love talking Pitt sports with you guys, so do as many podcasts as you like. I appreciate it, Chris. I think we are going to call this one now, and then tape a morning pit. We'll talk about Cam Corrin on the morning pit. We'll switch topics there. We'll just kind of, we all complained about NIL and Dayon Hayes and Pitt football and college sports and life here for this hour, and then we'll have a nice little tidy 20-minute feel-good morning pit tomorrow, talking about adding to the Pitt basketball roster and what that might look like. So let's do that. Let's take a clean break. Everybody, thanks for tuning in tonight. I appreciate it. We do one, we do this emergency podcast, and you never know who's going to show up, but you guys showed up, had a lot of great comments, a lot of great questions. We had great interaction, so I appreciate it. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way, if you subscribe, you can turn on notifications, and then whenever we do one of these live shows, you'll get a notification sent right to your phone, so you know that we are going live. You're like, oh, Panther is going live. Good, they're going to complain about Dayon Hayes and this whole transfer situation. So, that's the best way to make sure you don't miss a live stream, whether it's post-game, our Wednesday night show, or these live Panther-Lair shows here that we throw in whenever we need to. But thanks for tuning in tonight. Thanks for all the comments and questions. Thanks for watching it later in the week if that's what you did. Have a good Monday night, everybody, and we will talk to you tomorrow on the Morning Pit here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.